Hello, welcome to Friday I'm in Bed.
Podcast for midlife women living their best life, but in bed by 10.
This week on Friday I'm in Bed, we're starting with the fact that fewer people are going out in the evenings and pubs are closing at a rate of 2 a day in the UK. We're asking, why? Is it the cost of living, £10 pints, or just a shift in how people want to spend their time? Younger generations seem to be choosing the gym, coffee and earlier nights. So should we be looking at a more Mediterranean model instead, where evenings are slower, social and not centred around alcohol?
Then we're talking about more women choosing to live together in later life. Is it about cost, companionship, or something bigger? A move towards community and mutual support rather than relying on traditional structures. We're asking the question, have you actually thought about who's going to look after you as you get older? Or is it time we start planning to look after ourselves and each other? So grab a cuppa and let's get into it. Hi, Gemma. How are you?
Hi, Kate. How are you? We've been pissing people off this week, I hear.
Apparently so.
Us not looking at the camera has been a point of contention. Obviously, most of you will be listening on like Spotify or something anyway, but it'll be the reels on Instagram and the TikToks that are causing some consternation because we are not looking at the camera. So I'm just going to tell you that I know it's hard to believe, but this is not a professional studio setup. So if you're going to watch like Zoe Ball on a podcast, yeah, I think that they've got a lot of people helping them out with that. Whereas me and Kate have our laptops and a camera, and the laptop camera is at the top and our faces are below that. And if we have to read a script, we also don't have a teleprompter. So that's somewhere else entirely. So that is why we're not looking at the camera, and we are deeply sorry if you find it upsetting. And also we're deeply sorry if today we just stare at the camera constantly.
I know, but I've realised I look at you. Like when I'm talking to you, I look at your face and your face is below the camera. So now, if anyone's watching this, I'm looking at the camera, but now it just feels a bit like it just feels
weird.
So.
Yeah. And anyway, I'm
Who
gorgeous.
cares?
Why wouldn't we want to look at me? I'm admiring that top. That's nice.
It's a dress. Got bunnies on it.
Oh, okay. So if you are just listening to this, you really need to like go and look at the bunny dress on TikTok. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. Go look at the bunny dress because it's great.
Wait, how are you, Gemma?
Yeah, I'm good. Today is my annual Gems in a Funny Mood day because it's the 5-year anniversary of the day I had my MRI and was then wheeled into hospital. So I tend to this is the day where I get a bit because I remember like it was scary and it was lonely and it was horrible. But other than that, there's nothing wrong with me now. So I'm just grumpy, but I promise not to let it affect my opinions on anyone who's annoying today. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm in a lot better frame of mind than the last week and the week before. My daughter's had one GCSE. They all start properly on Monday. And then it's like 2 a day. And yeah, I feel like I'm ready to sit the English literature paper 1. Like I've been revising it with her. I can tell you about A Christmas Carol. Amazing. Like literally I'm ready. I'm also ready to take the RE exam. I can talk to you about Islam. I'm there. That's my life. Literally helping my daughter. And the thing is I set a precedent. Like I did this with my son. So I kind of feel like I have to. And then that sounds really awful, doesn't it? Like I don't love her as much. And obviously I do, but I'm like, oh, damn, I wish I just was like, get on with your revision. Whereas I'm now like writing flashcards and testing her. But yeah, it's all good.
When I revised for my GCSEs, I recorded all my notes onto a tape. A tape. I am tape old. And then just sat and listened to them back, like that was going to help. And then every now and again on the tapes, there was me. I'd have music on in the background, Guns N' Roses, if you want to know. But every now and again, I'd go, oh, hang on, I like this song. And sit there in silence.
Sweet child of mine.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if that was the best revision tactic, but it was what it was. Nobody wrote me flashcards.
It's a really good one. I mean, I must say I'm only helping with the ones that I actually like. I have an English literature degree, so helping her with her English literature GCSE is actually fun to me. But when it comes to like maths and science, I'm like, oh, see you later.
You're on your own.
Definitely. So yeah, all is good here. But we've got lots to chat about today. So should we get into it?
Yes, let's get into it.
first topic of discussion today is all about partying and boozing and all the things we did loads of in the late 80s and throughout the 90s, maybe into the noughties, but nobody's really doing today. So The Guardian wrote an article this week. It was more of an opinion piece, so it wasn't full of like stats and things, about somebody going out in Birmingham on a Saturday night, and it was like a ghost town. Although Ghost Town by Fun Boys by the Specials, that was actually
By the
about
Specials,
Birmingham, wasn't it?
yeah.
Because they were from
I
Birmingham.
don't know.
Anyway, I digress. It's a ghost town. Nobody's going out. And there's also been a BBC report this week, particularly focusing on Gen Zs and how they are not going out. So Gen Zs are like 15 years old, obviously too young to be going out, up to 29, maybe even 30 now. They might have all had their, starting to have their 30th birthday. So young people basically aren't going out. Interestingly, it was also reported last week that a pint has hit the heady heights of a tenner. So, a couple of facts before I jump into some of the reasons young people are saying they're not going out is that it was reported yesterday on the news that 2 pubs are closing a day in the UK. A quarter of late night venues have closed since 2020. Obviously, the pandemic will be a big part of that. And in fact, the pandemic's probably played a big part in all of this as a whole. Mm-hmm. But also, it's worth talking about inflation. So I was reading some of the comments on some of these articles, as I do. And there's quite a few people talking about them going out in 1980. And a pint was 25p. I think it's actually 23p, but 25p. So I went into the Bank of England's inflation checker calculator, which told me that with inflation, if a pint was 25p in 1980, it should be £1.09 today. And we know it's just hit a tenner in some locations. Obviously, I know that if, that's probably London and it's probably in a big glossy bar, but still. And I know personally, I used to go out in like 1989, 88, 90 with a fiver. My mum always tells me she gave me a fiver to go out, which was to pay for the taxi. She said, but I always heard you walking up the road. You never seemed to get a taxi. It was like, yeah.
Oh, they dropped me at the end of the road.
However, if you went out in 1990 with a fiver in your pocket, and you had the night of your life, which we all did in 1990, the equivalent would be £12.60 today. And I said to my son, could you go out on £12.60? And he was like, it costs £3, I think, or £5 to get into the pub that is open till late. And then there's the club. And obviously, you can get a pint for a fiver in Wetherspoon, but then when you go to the pub, the one that you pay for, it's £6, £7, like no chance. So the report from the BBC has mentioned a few things. Obviously, inflation, cost of living, and young people are saying, actually, I'd rather, I've got to save up for a house or save up for a car, save up, I'm paying off my student loan, we don't have a lot of disposable cash, which of course nobody has a lot of disposable cash really these days, but young people particularly haven't. A lot of people are saying they're choosing not to drink at all. In fact, lifestyles are changing. If you think of, I could absolutely talk about myself, but when I was 18, obviously when I was legally drinking, I went out and I partied all night and I got up and went to work the next day, bleary-eyed.
How did we do that?
Young people today, apparently, prefer the gym and coffee and things, which also seem really super relevant to me because, often I go out and I fancy a hot chocolate. Like, why aren't there establishments where you can just get a hot drink or a soft, it's all revolving around alcohol. And if you're choosing not to drink, we know that sober living is seriously on the rise in general, but particularly with young people who we generally associate with boozing. One woman said she didn't want to appear in the background of other people's stories. So obviously people are filming, so there's this, it's easy to say, young people are just on their phones, but they're saying, well, no, we're out, but we're ending up on other people's stories or being recorded, and that's all a bit rubbish. And another thing, the final thing before I open this up for debate and discussion, was an interview with Louise McLean, I think that's how you say it, who is a director of a pub chain. I don't know which pub chain. And she's saying that young people want to be entertained. So whilst our entertainment was just going down the pub and getting drunk,
drinking,
falling over and stumbling home and not getting in that taxi my mother had given me the money for, young people are wanting more. So it made me think of the cinema chat we've talked about I think about Christmas time, we were talking about how people aren't going to the cinemas, but actually people want experiences, secret cinema. There's a rise for older people going to raves, like reclaiming the nostalgic part of things. Like people want something specific to do. Grassroots venues are struggling, so music venues, but when people do go to them, they are there because there's something to do. And actually just sitting in the pub just feels, to them apparently, just a bit boring. So yeah, that's the topic for debate. Did you, Gemma, my first question, this is obviously an ironical question. Ironical?
Ironical?
Ironical is the wrong word. Did you go out boozing as a youngster? Or were you going to the gym and drinking matcha?
No. I don't think you could get matcha. I think matcha was like, yeah.
No, you couldn't.
No. Yes. Very much so. I mean, yeah, I can remember. So we used to buy when we were obviously old enough to drink. Yeah. So we used to drink outside of like the music venue that we used to go to when we were kids. We used to go to the off license across the road, and they used to sell a bottle of wine called La Mancha, which was delicious. And I remember it was £1.99, and then we used to get 10 silk cut. I think they were like £1.10 or something like that. So we would be able to get a bottle of La Mancha, and we'd push the cork in with a key because we didn't have screw tops then either.
No, we didn't.
So I get my Zimmer frame out now, and 10 silk cut, and have a few quid left to pay the entry to the venue for a £5. So a £5 was like a good amount of money to go out on. So I hate talking about this because you're like, literally, I am so old.
Well, you say that, but some of the people in the comments were also, from the inflation perspective, were saying you could go out with like 20 quid in 2008.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that the kind of inflation and the cost of living thing is a big part of it. If you're not sensible with your money, it's not just that, you might not be able to buy a house. It's like you might not be able to pay your gas and electric bill. I mean, our gas and electric bill was like £15 a month or something stupid. Yeah. I mean, and even in even 10 years ago, our gas and electric bill was like £40-50 a month. Now it's like 200. So and I'm certainly not earning anymore. So something's got to give. I mean, I quite often joke that I need a responsible adult, and I seem to get Gen Z responsible adults a lot. So, and the last couple of times I've been on holiday, when I've been on those like group trips that I've been on, my roommate has been Gen Z. So the first roommate I had was 21, and the second one was 29 on the last two trips I went on. So they were Gen Zs, but I just joke that they were my responsible adults because they're all way more grown up than me. They were like, oh, hey. Yeah. And I'm like, oh dear. But then yesterday I was having a pedicure because I can't reach my feet and I'm so bougie now. And the girl that does my pedicures has been doing them for ages, and she's 22. And I made some stupid joke about people having a 5-year plan, and she went, oh, I've got a 5-year plan. And I was like, what?
No, they're really grown
so
up.
her and her partner are saving for a house, and like they've got like when I was 22, that never even crossed my mind. But I guess, house prices having gone up so much, if you don't start thinking about that at 22, you're never going to have anywhere to live. And I mean, even like rents are a nightmare now, and finding somewhere to rent. I get why that like everything is just so ridiculous now that you can't be frivolous. It feels like frivolity and impulsivity is gone. Do you think we've lost something by?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think it's a bit of a rite of passage, the whole going out, partying. Now, I mean, I don't drink, it's worth saying. I'm 11 years sober. I'm not, but even if you're not drunk, it's this rite of passage of going out, meeting people organically, so you're not sliding into DMs or swiping left or right or whatever. You're out, you're meeting people. And do you know what? I've got to big up some of the young people in my life a minute, because last Thursday was my son's final project for college. So he's 18, so it's like A-level equivalent. And he had to put on an event, and he put on a gig. He headlined, and they had like nearly 150 through the door of a 175 capacity venue. It was really full, and it was full of young people partying and enjoying themselves. And it's like, I sat there, well, all of us oldies sat there in a kind of like, oh, this is how it should be, because this is how it was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing, obviously, it isn't like that. People aren't going out. And the same venue that we went to that I'm talking about, they were talking to me about how the cost per head, the bar bill tab per head is just not doing the maths. You know, they can get 500 people through the door, but 500 people aren't spending a lot of money because of the price, because older people, so our generation, are maybe having to get a taxi home, or they're not drinking because they're driving home, or they've got to get back for the child, you know, the babysitter or whatever. So there's kind of less partying, and young people just don't have the money. Therefore, they're getting people through the door to watch the band, but people aren't spending on alcohol, which is a big part of how the venue has, you know, makes money. And you see, and the youngsters, God, I sound old, round the corner at the corner shop off license, buying their alcohol before they go in. They don't take it in, they drink it outside. And you sort of think, oh, but then we did exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
However, we still had money to spend money when we were in there. So it's kind of like
They just drank a lot more.
Yeah, well, there are some still drinking, but they can't afford to drink. And you have to pay to get in. Like there's this pub near us that's open till 2. It's not a club, it's a pub. Well, kind of, you know, it's a bit glam. And you go from there to the club, but you have to pay to get in there. So you have to pay to get in the pub before you even like it's the youngsters. The other thing that came up quite a lot is the Think 25 rule, which of course is a good thing. We don't want, you know, we need everybody's alcohol consumption to be checked, let's just say.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we are a nation that has historically binged a lot. So I get it all. But when we were younger, anyone could, well, particularly, you know, you could get served. And I'm not saying that's a good thing.
But it means that it's changed the culture.
It has changed the culture because you've got to take ID, and even though you've got ID, you've got to be
and it's harder to forge these days.
Well, you can't. Yeah.
A piece of paper put through the school laminator is not going to cut it.
No. And even when you have genuine, because some of them do forge it, when you have genuine ID, it feels like you have to prove it, and you've got security on the door of all of the pubs and stuff on a Saturday night, which is, again, sad because it shouldn't be needed, but it is needed. And lots of people saying, you know, we had a different culture back in the 80s and 90s and probably earlier. You know, like we went out drinking early, but it just doesn't happen anymore.
So I feel like there's kind of two aspects to it. I am never going to argue that it's bad that people are drinking less and thinking about their health more.
No,
that's not something that I'm going to argue. But I think it's that opportunity to be a bit irresponsible for a while that's missing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you're young, that's the bit where you get to do it. And if you can kind of say, you know, well, when you're older, when you retire or whatever, and, you know, kids have left home, then maybe you can be responsible then, but you're too old to be irresponsible then because you've learned that you need to be responsible. Like the fear is there. Like, you know, the things that you would have done without like throwing yourself off a cliff. I'm talking about like bungee jumping, you know, like not just like throwing yourself off a cliff. You know, the risky things, sometimes there's that little bit of like, well, is that safe though? Have we done the health and safety checks creeps in? And I think it is a shame to lose that bit where you get to be irresponsible. However, for the other angle of it is what you were saying about getting out in real life and socializing with people. But actually, I do see an increasing amount of events and places where you can do that. Locally to me particularly, there are a few things. There's we have an alcohol-free bar in Norwich. It's attached to a sauna and cold plunge place called Lion's Den, and so there's one in the city that has an alcohol-free bar, and they do food and they do all kinds of alcohol-free booze and stuff like that. But they also had one down by the river, and I've been for nights out there before where they just literally do like loaded hot chocolates and matcha lattes and toasties and things. So I've had like a lovely evening there by the river with the lights on when the sun's light, and it's covered, and they've got like fire pits and blankets, and you can get marshmallows to toast. And I've had like an amazing night out there with people I know, and they do social events as well.
Do they serve alcohol at all?
I think they might do a hot chocolate with Baileys in it.
Because the problem I have with
that's it. They don't sell alcohol at all there, though there is a pub next door or at the one in the city.
Because the problem, I mean, that sounds amazing. For me, my husband would hate that, and I want to go out with him. And I think this then kind of brings up the whole kind of Mediterranean vibe where
Mm.
people drink outside. Obviously, the weather is a lot better. And you might get your alcohol from there, but you might get an ice cream or a waffle or whatever from the one next door, and you all sit outside and there's family, and you still have fun, and you might then go on clubbing maybe, but it's that
Yeah.
kind of, we're all together and we all have our different like needs, if you like, whereas pub culture in the UK is 100% built around.
I think, I have seen more places, like the pub around the corner from me that always does a couple of alcohol-free options, but they're not like a lot of them. I think the range is broadening from just, I'll have a Coke then, I think, or a J2O. So some of them do alcohol-free beers and stuff, but I do agree with you
Coffee and
for
cake.
our generation. But I was kind of thinking more about like, the younger generation, the Gen Zs that are socializing, and they are socializing and they're going to these kind of alcohol-free spaces. And that's one of the things that they do, like a singles night there. So, so they do like a dating night and that kind of thing. And they do digital detox there, I think, as well. Someone was saying the other day. I've also noticed things like social runs. So there was one that a lot of people I know are buying a ticket for at the moment, which was, and I'm just not sure I can do it, because it's a Saturday evening run for people who would like to socialize without alcohol, but it's got a back to the 90s theme.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but there's some of us who are like, but it's still the 90s, surely. That was only last week.
Yeah, I think
So for like £10, you get an alcohol-free drink. You go for like a little 5K run around the streets at 7:00 on a Saturday night, and they meet people and they socialise. So I think maybe there are other options opening up.
You live in Norwich, and Norwich
Yeah.
is cool, and it's, in my brain, it's independent. It's a lot of indies, whereas, where I am, there are some things, but not a lot. If there is a reason to go out, so if somebody does put on to be fair, one of the pubs does a single night, but it's all the oldies that go there. Young people, they'll end up going, where would they go? The cinema or the gym? I mean, that is what's happening in our town. I mean, saying that, my son seems to go out on a Saturday night and roll in at 4 a.m. So there are some people going out, I tell you, but obviously not enough. But it's expensive, isn't it?
I guess
ultimately?
maybe it'll spread.
But £10 a pint.
I know, that is outrageous. Well, I mean, I went to a beer festival at the weekend, and quite often I'll buy like thirds, like especially at a beer festival. So you can actually, a lot of places you can buy like a third of a pint now.
Right.
Because it was a craft beer festival, I kind of didn't notice, but a lot of those third of a pints were costing like £4. And then you're kind of like, oh my God, that is like £12 a pint. Like, so yeah, but I mean, it stopped me getting blotto, I guess.
But what will we do? So if the pubs continue at the rate, well, I was going to say, what will everybody do? But we'll probably do all the things we've just mentioned. How do we stop the pubs then? Or how do they stop? Because how are they all going to survive if young people and that, in the next round, that become legal, don't go to them, and we all disappear?
This is something that I've thought about a lot, and it's like, and I think we were talking about, I can't remember what topic it was we were talking about now, when we were kind of saying that your businesses have to adapt to what's going on, and if they don't adapt, they will close. So if people aren't wanting to buy £10 pints, and they want entertainment, what can you give them at your venue which will make them want to come? So it's not a case of saying, oh, well, none of them are drinking, so all the pubs are going to have to close, because people will always still want those spaces where they can socialise or get together or not be in their house. Even when we lived through 2020, not being in your house is always a good thing. But you have to become that space. You can't just go, oh, well, we've always just sold booze and it's too expensive now and no one's coming. You have to think, right, well, what are they going to buy? Can I sell thirds of a pint, for example? Can I sell more interesting beers? So I'm not just doing like Foster's or whatever, so that people will try several, like buy a flight of third of a pint of 3 different beers, or a bigger range of alcohol-free beers and spirits, or put entertainment on, whatever it is that people want entertaining with. I can't stand entertainment in pubs personally, because it gets in the way of me talking too much, but there we go.
Our pub has a pub quiz every other Monday. I'm hosting the next one. I'm the stand-in host on Monday, and they have bingo. Obviously, it's not a young demographic, but I think that
Oh, but Bongo's Bingo. Have you heard of Bongo's
no.
Bingo? We walked past. I think it's like a touring thing, so they do it around the country. But it's like a trendy bingo thing where there's a lot of woo cheering and whooping and all that kind of stuff. And we walked past. They have it in Epic Studios in Norwich, and we walked past there at the weekend, and there was a queue outside, and there were mostly women, and there were at least 4 hen parties in the queue. And I was like, I bet there's a Bongo's Bingo on this evening. And I looked on their website, and yes, I was correct. There was a Bongo's Bingo.
I haven't heard
So
of
yeah,
that.
bingo's not just for the oldies.
Oh, but I was thinking, because Saturday night in Bedford, the Rose till close, which they pay to go into, which is a pub, and then they go over the road to Aston's, the nightclub. They are full of young people because they can finally drink and they're out and stuff. But I wonder how busy they are on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Probably all right on a Friday. So they need to take so much money on that Saturday. And I think there's a lot of pubs who aren't aiming for young people, more aiming at my generation, but we don't go to the pub every day. Historically, people, particularly men, went to the pub every night. They'd have their dinner and then they'd walk down the pub and go and see their mates every single night of the week. We do actually have a pub like that in the village. I do call it the old man's pub because
I
it's
love an old
literally
man.
full of old men. And they go, but I don't want to go there either. And actually, there's not that many, there's not that many men in the village like going there. So, and there's a lot of those kind of pubs. Like, people aren't going to the pub every single night, are they? Like they used to. So it's not just young people. Like older people used to go to the pub every night.
Yeah, a lot of local pubs close. They're not open every day. They're only open. Saves them the money. You quite often walk past them and there's like literally 1 or 2 people sat in there if they are open. So yeah, I see that. But what are you gonna do? I mean, what are you gonna do? There you go. We've solved that.
Well, we haven't really. It's really true. I do think when I look at, as I said before, like the Mediterranean model of families, it's worth saying that younger people, the drinking age is younger. You're allowed to drink with your family.
In moderation, yeah.
Yeah, and people have, a drink at lunchtime and then maybe go back out in the afternoon, like in the evening, and there's families. And yes, some people are having coffees, some people aren't, and they're eating or not eating, it's just it's much more of a community thing. Whereas I feel like, well, I don't know what's happening now. We're all just staying in and watching Netflix.
But you get the things like bar snacks and stuff like that. I mean, I really remember when I was in Venice going into a bar that was obviously like a post-work kind of bar, and they were literally putting pasta out in front of you, like communal pasta. Feels a bit weird to me, but there were actual. But I do remember. I mean, my mum and dad have been in the pub trade for years, and my mum used to on Sunday we'd put roast potatoes on the bar. They give people little snacks and things. So, and I think that's more of a like that Mediterranean kind of family culture. There's snacks, a couple of drinks, a little bit of chat, and then you go home. Like, you don't have to be there all night just getting drunk. And I think maybe that's the atmosphere in some pubs suggests that it's not that kind of like communal, having a nice drink and a chat culture. It's more like you have to be drinking and get drunk. It's not a nice place to be. So the onus is on pubs to, if they don't want to close, to find the thing that's going to get people in. Obviously, there's also a massive kind of cost of living cultural issue, which is probably someone way more important than me's problem to solve, like the government. But also, I do think younger people are finding different ways to socialise that doesn't involve alcohol.
I think they probably, so many of them would listen to our tales of going out and what we got up to and just be like, what? Whereas we, I think, look at them a bit like, your plan, you've got a 5-year plan and you're 20.
You've got what?
And you're going to the pub on a Saturday night.
What are you doing?
But you're right. The times, they are a-changing, or in fact, they have changed. And I feel like I agree with you. The onus needs to be on them to change, or and that could be as literally as putting on a music quiz. We've got a venue that does a music quiz once a month, and everybody goes to it. So it's like, well, what else could you do? But I also recognise there's a lot of talk, particularly with grassroots venues. I hear it a lot. Obviously, I do go to music venues. That's where we go when we go out, to be fair. But it's all the message is like, use it or lose it. But it's like, I can't afford to go to a gig Thursday, Friday, and Saturday because obviously everything's gone up in price. Even if I only drank water, literally, it's still like I can't, I'm having to choose which one I go to. Whereas when I was younger, you may have gone to them all because they would have only cost a couple of quid. So I think it's if you put on too much choice, you might dilute you might be better off closing, as you just said, closing and opening on your busy nights than putting on lots and lots of things, and then you're diluting. Because I can't go to all the things. I've got to choose my one thing that I go to. Do you know what I mean? Like if there's a quiz and then a bingo and then a this night and a that night, I can only afford to go at once.
It's a more considered approach to socializing, maybe, where you're not just going, oh, I'm just going to go out all the time. You're picking, and it's that going back to, it's an experience. You're going to pick an experience and you're going to focus on that rather than, everything being available to you all the time.
I've just thought one thing though, before we end is, and this is a bit like the X is going back to raves, but gigs that end at 10 o'clock, it's that kind of thing, which is obviously our whole, like, it's Friday and I'm in bed, is this whole, want to go out but want to be in bed by 10. Actually, when a gig ends early and I can be back and in bed, by 11:30, because I've still got to get home and that's great. But when these things are ending at 11, 11:30, again, it just, if all the people spending all the money are our generation, which by all accounts a lot of it is, particularly with music venues, ending early is not a bad move. And then all the staff can go home anyway. Then you can stop paying the staff.
Yeah, I feel like we need to do that as a topic in the future, the afternoon raves and the reclaiming.
Yeah, Annie Mac, the DJ, the Radio 1 DJ, started, she was the first one to bring out like a rave night, not rave as such, like a club night in the dark. So when you went in there, and it started at like 6 o'clock, and you wouldn't know it wasn't 11 o'clock at night.
The clubs never had windows anyway. You could have been there at any time.
Exactly. But it ended at 10. And now, because obviously she was so high profile, more and more people are doing that. And that's great, isn't it? It's just I can't be ready that early either because I've got to cook the tea. And it's like,
You've got a window. You've got a window.
8:30, 10 o'clock, please.
Stop. Okay, so we're going to move from young people to older people now. We're going to do both ends of the spectrum today and how they're cracking on and living their lives. So the kind of thing that prompted this idea that I wanted to talk about this in my head was a story about a woman in Canada, as it happens, called, checks notes, Pat Dunn. And she started an organisation called Senior Women Living Together, it started as a Facebook group. So basically she was married and divorced and then married again. And in 2014, her husband died suddenly. They were living on a boat, I think. And when he died suddenly, she lost access to his pension and everything, I believe, as well. So all of the kind of financial scaffolding that had been holding up her retirement years just collapsed around her. She sold the boat that they were living in, and she realised that she basically didn't have enough money to support herself. And when she was like 70, she was sitting there Googling how to live safely in your car, which isn't exactly how you want to be living out your senior years, is it? So in 2019, she set up a Facebook group, hoping to find some like-minded women who might share a house with her, because there was a lack of affordable housing for her. And by the end of the first week, 50 women had joined. And by the end of the first month, 200. So there were obviously a lot of women out there in the same position, finding themselves without the structures that they thought they were going to have in their retirement years and looking for an alternative. So it's a bit Golden Girls. Part Golden Girls, part kind of survival strategy, because obviously women are disadvantaged in a lot of these things, which I will go into. But I don't necessarily want to talk about the structures and then the housing crisis and the lack of money and stuff. I kind of want to talk about the relationships and female friendship and how we look at what our older years are going to be like. The first thing is, obviously, even in the UK, women quite often have gaps in their national insurance record. They earn less on average than men. They take time out to have children, so their careers might not be as high up. So by the time they do get to their retirement years, women in general may not be as well off as their husbands. So that can be a precarious position for some women to be in. So there is that, but also one of my big considerations was thinking about the pressure we put on those traditional structures, that relationship, like we're going to get married and have children, and then the children will look after us in our older age. And like, yeah, like that's guaranteed. And that's what it's going to be. And why we feel like that romantic relationship at the center, the husband-wife thing, has to be the main support structure with children that we have like in our later years. Why don't we look at those kind of our friendships? There's many kinds of love and relationships in our lives that we can to when we need it. And I think that it benefits women particularly because we generally live longer than the men in our lives as well, to think about that early on. And sometimes it feels a little bit maybe morbid to be sitting around with your mates over a cocktail and discussing whether you're going to move in together when you're 70, who's going to look after you if you get dementia. But maybe it is something we should be discussing. And a friend of mine who was down this weekend, she is also married, no children. We were discussing whether we would write each other into our wills and our kind of death in service benefits. Not that I have that because I'm self-employed, but that kind of thing, and whether there was a place that we can share that amongst us, because we've been friends, since we were 11. It's not like we're going to split up. Maybe friendship groups do change, but I think it's just a really interesting thought to start looking at what we assume our lives are going to be like. I mean, do you have plans? Like, we talk about these 5-year plans a minute ago, don't we? I mean, have you assumed what your life is going to be like once you retire?
Well, interestingly, when we turned 50, we did start talking about it. But I don't think we've agreed on what it is. So I have a vision and my husband has a vision, and they're not necessarily the same. They are the same vision, but not quite. I'm self-employed, so there's more flexibility. He's employed, so there is less flexibility, which means, I could go I don't even need to go part-time. I could run my business from anywhere in the world and go traveling and start winding down, whereas he would have to go part-time and there are no part-time positions. So it's a little bit trickier. What I think's really interesting when you were talking, I was thinking, when we all think of retirement from when we're young, when we don't really think of retirement, but you have this kind of vision probably based around what your grandparents did. Do you know what I mean? Your vision when you're 20 is like, oh, your grandparents obviously retired at some point, and I don't know, my nan baked and he walked up the road and watched the Ipswich football team. That's my only memory of what they did. They did more than that, I'm sure. But, you kind of have these kind of ideas. And then you start working and eventually you do start thinking about a pension maybe, and you start thinking about retirement. Always linked in your mind with a companion stroke husband stroke partner. And now obviously it is because we've been brought up in a world where that is the path you are 100% expected to follow. Definitely Gen X, even millennials, I think, that is the path. I think younger people are challenging that we are. That is the kind of path we were supposed to follow. So you said, oh, what do you want to do in retirement? Of course, I'm thinking about me and my husband. But I would have said that 20 years ago before I'd even met him. Because I presume I'd be with someone.
Because you just assume you're going to have that relationship.
Do you know what I mean? And then there's the whole conversation about your children looking after you is the other preconception I think that we have. I don't know if it's necessarily we, but society, and actually probably we all generally have, because people say it to people that don't have children, which I'm sure you've heard, who's going to look after you? So again, the presumption is somewhere along the line that don't worry if you get sick, because if you have a child, they will look after you, which again is like, well, A, will they? Well, A, do you have a child? B, will they want to look after you? Because not everybody has a great relationship, and also they have their own life. But also, how are they supposed to afford to look after you? Because if they're struggling to get on the housing, like they might not have a house, like then they might not have any room. Like, how are they actually helping you? They might come and bathe you, but they can't financially help. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many preconceived ideas within this traditional structure of retirement, and let alone who's going to pay the bills or how you're going to pay for any of it. Do you know what I mean? It's so tied up
Yeah.
with how we've been
So
brought up.
I have some stats.
Okay.
I have some stats about that, which I've obviously put in about 4 different places on my notes, because why would I not have a little stats box? So I can tell you that 3.64 million UK over 65s live on their own, and nearly 70% of those are women.
So
So
3.65 million, did you say?
64 million, yeah, over 65 live alone,
Live
and
alone.
70% of those are women living alone.
Okay.
I can tell you that over 1 million UK over 65s have never been parents, which is predicted to double to 2
Yeah.
million by 2030. And also that 92% of unpaid care in the UK is provided by family, primarily partners and adult children. So obviously, when you start looking at those stats, this is something that's not gonna be sustainable for very long. Quite often, I think, see, we talked about the male loneliness epidemic before as well, which is quite often framed as women being responsible, like, because men can't find a woman who's going to marry them and live out their lives with them. But it's not just that, is it? Women tend to have stronger social support structures. Women have more friends, and they're quite often even the glue in a romantic, in a traditional nuclear family kind of relationship. They are often the social glue and the social organizers of things. So that kind of male loneliness epidemic could be more to do with friendship groups than it is to do with not being able to find a wife to cook their dinner. From our perspective, from female perspective, maybe we're quite well placed to find other people to live out our lives with. As at those female friendships, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've certainly got a small group of friends that I've been friends with, since the end of primary school, because I moved around that time, but definitely since like the start of secondary school, and even friends that I've made kind of later on in my life that I know I could rely on if everything went to hell.
I don't know. See, I don't have a huge group. I mean, I'd like to live on my own. I'm not in the Golden Girls group. Like, I don't want to live with 4 other women. I'm more than happy to be on my own, as long as obviously I could financially, afford that. What I find interesting is the amount of women I speak to on a daily basis, obviously through the work I do on Instagram and stuff around positive aging, is when women find themselves newly single in their 50s. Obviously, the divorce rate is at its highest sort of at 50 for women. So many of them, I don't actually have a stat, but are saying, actually, I don't want to go back to the traditional structure. Actually, I want to be on my own. So I think that's probably adding to the amount of women that are then on their own at retirement age, because they're going, do you know what? It's the whole crazy cat lady at, ridiculous thing.
So they don't leave those relationships and think, oh, I need to find another man.
No, they're like,
whereas
my dog is
a
good.
man may be more likely to leave and then be looking for a female companion.
So I think that's probably part of it. But even when you were talking about, a friend structure, you were saying about your conversation with your friend. How about your sister, for example, living with your sister at 75? So I wonder where the stereotype, has that just come from the patriarchy, men, going, you're the crazy old spinster cat lady, when actually the crazy old cat spinster, all of those in inverted commas, is like happy as Larry, living with her sister, growing her veg, with her book club, just living her life how she wants.
My instinct tells me that that's exactly what it is. If we just look at I feel like I'm saying a lot of men are more likely to. There are stats to back this up in a lot of places. Don't have them all here. I'll find them later. I'm terrible at statistics. But that thing of men, it's not in the patriarchy's advantage to encourage women to think that they can live out their later years on their own with their cats and their books, because the men traditionally are a lot keener on having female companionship in their later years rather than living alone with their cats and their books. Those negative stereotypes come up. I mean, you've only got to look at like the old things of like witches. They're always old ladies living alone, aren't they? And like helping the local community by providing healthcare and advice. Like, evil.
It also makes me think of communes as well, because again, I don't know much about commune living. Community, like a commune is
communal.
Because again, the stereotype is, they're all like work shy hippies, which they are not, because they are all working for the community and helping each other out. And there are so many benefits of not just being you and your partner or you on your own, but being, with a community where you can help each other. And, I'll grow the vegetables and you bake the bread. And it
Yeah.
sounds idealistic, but it's idyllic. I can't
Idyllic.
speak. It sounds like both. Idyllic to me. It actually sounds quite nice. And
Mm.
is this women in their 70s going, actually, it takes a village, and let's all bring the village and work together and help each other out and have contentment.
See, one of the things, the interesting thing about that idea of communal living is that would not necessarily be gendered, and that would be,
Yes.
I mean, that would be a great thing where everybody brings their strengths to the
Party.
situation. Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and it's maybe a little bit different, but maybe that's like a literal cultural thing. So women are the ones in this instance that we're talking about here, and there are a few kind of similar UK examples. Our social support network is stronger than in like the US and Canada, so it's not quite the same. But of women setting up these things, and maybe it's because they have that more like communal frame of mind of helping each other out. And I mean, I think it would be fantastic. I'd be totally there for, I don't know, actually. Maybe we have this. And then I went, oh no, because I might have to talk to my neighbors then. And like, but actually when you do, it's nice. And maybe that is the thing that society has given us, is that kind of isolationist idea that, we want to be on our own.
It's not even living on your own as such. If I think of the road we live in, I mean, yeah, we might say hello or nod to our neighbours, but it's all very like, this is our house, this is our boundary, that's my fence. No, that's not your fence, that's my fence. Very much so, isn't it? And, we are here, this is and obviously it is ours, we own it, it is our space. But we all behave like that, don't we? So we don't actually just reach out and help and support. And we definitely don't utilize people's skills or strengths, which is a shame. How do we break that? Or do we break that? Have we?
Well,
Is that a
so this is what I
capitalist
was thinking,
society?
like with the conversation with my friend at the weekend, is like, so like a 1 in 5 over 50s in the UK don't have children.
Okay.
So that is a lot of people. So if we are talking about that traditional structure where we're supposed to grow old and then our children are supposed to look after us, and then we die. We grow old with our spouse, our children look after us, and then we die. There's 1 in 5 over 50s that's not gonna happen for. That's not possible. And obviously there is an aging population with improving healthcare, and there is the social support structure in the UK, whilst it's better than in a lot of places, is not what's the word? Not infallible, you know what I'm trying to say. It's going to be a problem. If we're all getting older, there's not going to be enough money to look after us if our kids aren't going to do it. So why don't we start talking earlier about what we will do as we get older, especially if we have friends who are in a, like this, in a similar situation? Naming each other in wills, sharing death in service benefits, like living together later in life. They're kind of practical planning that we don't do. We might think about our pension maybe, but we don't necessarily think about what could be our options for living arrangements as we get older, especially if we don't fit that kind of straight narrative of having a nuclear family that's going to look after us. And these things can change in a heartbeat as well. Widowed, estranged from your children, divorced, all those things can change that kind of traditional structure that you thought you were going to have at any point. So it feels like a conversation maybe we should be having earlier. And I've always loved that concept of our chosen families as well. Finding those people that we do have a connection with, and that our chosen family, it doesn't have to be blood.
I have started asking people, or sort of, we are starting to have those conversations around what does retirement look like, obviously at that age now. And it's funny because some people really don't want to talk about it, but I think it's something that we all need to talk about, because again, I know retirement age, from a pension from the government perspective, keeps changing, and and nothing's guaranteed. I get all of that. But I think one of the things, I mean, even with in the menopause world I've been talking about with people is, once you're through menopause and you've dealt with all of that, and there's this kind of, I was going to say reawakening. It's not quite. It's like reinvention. It's like, okay, so what's next for me? And that's exciting. But if we're not careful, like that's done at 50, but what are we going to do at 65 or 67 or whenever it is? Like, what is the plan? And I've started to be quite fascinated to hear, like, have anybody started to think about, and it might just be, I'm going to work until I can't. And then I'll probably potter about in the garden. Well, what does that look like? Just to get a feel of what people want to do. But it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because people don't like talking about things like that either.
No, but I think that's one of the things is people don't like thinking about those kind of worst case scenarios as well, and like planning for death and disability and those kind of things. I think it's funny. We're planning our pensions and things. We're planning how we're going to live years in advance, make sure we've got enough money. And this is the average life expectancy. And therefore, I need this much money in my pension to live to this long. But you're not thinking about the investment in your health and your social care. Like, who am I going to be living and dying alongside in my old age? Like, if one of us goes first, if you're married, if one of us goes first, what's the other one going to do after that? And I mean, it could be, even if you're in that kind of traditional relationship, it could be very reassuring to know that your partner has thought about that and has somewhere to go if you suddenly pop your clogs.
I know, but people don't like talking about
Where
it.
Where does that come from? Pop your clogs.
I don't know. It's a bit of a funny one. I don't have any. Actually, I do have some clogs. I haven't.
Do you?
I do have some. I broke my foot on my clogs. But that's another story. I wasn't drunk. I was on the school run. Worth saying. Yeah, but people don't like talking about it. And I get why. And people might now be listening to this going, oh my God, this is a bit depressing. But I think like urging us all to think about, what do we want to do? Number one, like, how do you want to spend the rest of your life? Because, when you're young, you're told, what's your career? You have your career advisor and what you're going to do with your life, and I'm going to work in this industry and da-da-da-da-da. And you might think, yeah, I might have some kids, might not. But then nobody's like, what are you going to do when you stop working? How are you going to stop working? So it's kind of like, have that plan. And I always think try and make the plan without thinking about money. But obviously you've got to think about money because you can't do the plan without the money. But in a way, what do you want to do? And then once you've sussed that one out, okay, so what happens, when I am that much older, when I can't maybe do the things I want to do? What does that look like without relying on your children? Because I mean, I can't believe,
or your spouse who may not be there. Like,
you might not be there.
What does your wider support network look like?
Yes, and support network isn't just who am I going to spend my days with. It might be who am I going to cook with, or who am I going to go on holiday with? Who am I going to go to the seaside with? Who am I, just having that. It amazes me that people say to people that don't have children, who's going to look after you in your old age? It feels like every time I hear it, it's like, is that the reason to have kids? Do people have children just so they can look after you when you're 90?
They've got an unpaid carer.
An unpaid carer, because it might be cheaper to save all the money it costs to have a child and put it in a pot and an investment to pay for a carer.
For a really good nursing home, yeah.
That might be more cost effective. If that's the only reason, like, I can't believe, do people actually think that is the reason to have children?
Apparently so. Either that or they're just running out of rude questions to ask people who don't have children.
Maybe. But it just seems like the weirdest. As a parent, I have never once thought about them looking after me, even when I'm old. Because it's like, no, I'll still be looking after you. I can imagine hopefully, God willing, I'll be 85, still worrying about and helping and, my kids, not the other way round. I feel like, but who knows?
Yeah. So one thing everyone should do this week, find a friend. Think about your list of people that you might want to go and live with if you get older and you're on your own.
And
Think about your golden girl scenario.
Yeah, work out how many dogs or cats you're going to have. Because I'll have dogs.
Well, see, this is the issue. My particular friend that I was talking about this with is not necessarily a dog fan.
You can't live with her then.
No, I know. I'm surprised we're even friends.
I mean, it's like, dogs come first. Thank you for joining us for another roundup of midlife chat, hot takes, and occasional moaning. Well, quite a bit of moaning.
Make sure you hit subscribe so your podcast app gently nudges you every Friday, because honestly, who remembers anything without a reminder these days? And also, we like people liking us because we're very needy.
And if you fancy being extra lovely, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more brilliant women like you find us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and make sure you find time for yourself. You deserve it.